am presenting on Chapter 5 from our text, Classroom Management for Elementary Teachers, 10th edition, by Carolyn Evertson and Edmund Emmer. Chapter 5 is entitled Managing Student Work. This chapter outlines the processes involved in organization of student work. So the author opens with the importance of student accountability as means of developing students into independent learners, and goes on to state that our goal as teachers should be to facilitate learning and foster an understanding of the value of learning. Students who do not understand or are not bought into their academic goals will often not be as successful as those who are. Chapter 5 goes on to include processes for how to introduce work and the importance of providing clear expectations and instructions on how to do the work, and information about the format and due dates. Suggestions such as providing all of this information verbally and in print can be helpful since the needs of each student vary. So providing those, maybe writing them in their homework notebook for them, providing instructions up on the board so that all the students can see them, as well as verbally introducing instructions is important in the classroom. Secondly, monitoring student work in progress and at completion is an ongoing process. Teachers should monitor students in the room at all times and make sure there is an understanding and there is productivity in every setting, such as whole group and small group instruction, as well as individual work. It's important to have a regular procedure for turning in work. Students should have this clearly stated and reinforced with consistency throughout their school days. One suggestion that the authors provided for checking for homework specifically is to use a homework journal, like I mentioned before, where they keep all of their work in one place, and it's very easy to check in, make sure they're completing that work. Teachers will also need a system for keeping track of who has submitted work and who has not on other projects. Which leads us into maintaining records and the importance of data. Students' work can be recorded in gradebooks or whichever grading system each school uses. Student portfolios should also be used to show artifacts of students' work, because this information can be useful to show improvement over time or to request support for students who are requiring a little more help. We can also use student portfolios to show parents during parent-teacher conferences. Another thing that the author suggests is to provide regular, consistent feedback to students. This is necessary to move learning forward, and students should also be taught how to self-critique. So they should be able to look at their own work, say what they did well about it, say what needs work about it, as a means of learning. How to handle missed work is an important aspect of managing student work, especially when teachers work in schools with high rates of absenteeism. Teachers should have a clear, established procedure for the students to complete and submit their missed work. Tools such as catch-up folders can be useful, and students should be encouraged to complete missed work at home if possible, and or utilize downtime in the school to complete any they need assistance with. Students may also work with other student helpers to catch up on their work, or maybe even if they're far enough behind, they might need a volunteer or tutor assistance in the classroom. From here, we will look more closely at the importance of student accountability, monitoring the progress and completion of work, and how to handle absences through specific articles and studies. First, we'll talk about the importance of student buy-in and accountability. In this article, How to Produce a High-Achieving Child, the author Dina Kuhn focuses on the question of whether or not schools are providing meaningful experiences to engage students. The author suggests that making school make sense to students or making it relevant to them is essential to eliciting buy-in so that students will produce their best work. Ms. Kuhn states that there are two ways we can make sure that schools make sense to students. One is to center the curriculum on educational activities whose purpose and value are readily apparent to those who partake in them. Students should know why we're asking them to do assignments, why it's important, and why it's important to them. It can be a challenge because the work should reflect the lives of our students, and many of them come from a variety of backgrounds, but it's still important to provide different perspectives and classroom communities that are cultivated with respect and interest for one another make this a more efficient task. 2, we should be making the curriculum relevant to the adult lives that our students will live. It's important to open up the world to students who may not have perspective outside of the immediate world they live in, but it's also important not to ignore the lives that they live every day. This article ties back to the point in Chapter 5 of the text where the authors state that the goal for students is to become independent learners that can function in their future environments. In order to do this, they must be interested in the learning they are expected to participate and understand the why of what they're doing. Research indicates that assessment for learning improves student achievement, which means that we should always be assessing. As mentioned in Chapter 5 of the text, monitoring should be occurring at all parts of the work process. This article, minute by minute, day by day, reinforces that practice and adds that this monitoring can be used as assessment at every single level. When students converse in groups, practice individual work, answer and ask questions, finish projects, and hand in homework, teachers can use these interactions and observations for assessment. We should always be monitoring for understanding so that we can reteach, clarify, and adjust as needed. Because of the unending opportunity to assess on our feet, this article promotes a shift in philosophy that I particularly agree with, of moving away from end testing to concurrent testing so that teachers can make adjustments as needed and the most can be made out of instructional time. If we wait until the end of lessons and units, we've lost valuable time to make adjustments to help students understand the content. Of course, standardized assessments are required, but I believe that if teachers make a change in their thinking about assessments, this method can be a useful ongoing method for assessment and instructional time. Chapter 5 also provides procedures for handling missed work with some very good ideas for situational absenteeism, such as catch-up floaters, in-class helpers, small group support, volunteers, and tutors, as I mentioned before. However, it doesn't address the need to reduce chronic absenteeism, which in reality is more than just a problem for classroom teachers. But I believe that teachers can make a very real and important difference in attendance of their students if they're capable of understanding the reasons for chronic absenteeism and willing to take some steps to help cut that down. Present and accounted for, improving student attendance through family and community involvement is the article that I read, and it outlines some of the reasons and measures that students and teachers can take to address absentee issues. The two that I believe that are most effective are communication with families, reaching out and relationship building at the beginning of the school year with each of our families, and providing positive feedback so that when it's time to discuss important things like attendance, families more willing to listen to you, listen to the teacher, and understand why it's important for their student to be in school. I also believe that after-school programs can be effective, particularly in high poverty Title I schools, because we can use these as enrichment opportunities to extend the learning day, which is really important. But we could also use these as simply childcare for families who might not send their student to school all day at all because they're not available right after school for when they get home. So the after-school programs can be effective, like I said, as enrichment or just simply childcare necessary for parents. All of these practices lend to a positive classroom community which supports families and will encourage student buy-in so that students truly value their educational goals. And they work hard to become the independent learners that we strive for in our classrooms. In conclusion, The management of student work is a broad subject. If done well, the underlying organization needed to provide clear expectations, continuously monitor student work, and keep useful and accurate records will altogether promote a cohesive and engaging classroom environment. When all students are supported to do their best work through well thought out and deliberate instructions, effective feedback, and support for missed work, the classroom can work efficiently toward the gradual release of responsibility needed to produce independent learners with good critical thinking skills. It is necessary, especially in Title I school districts, to support families as well as students through continual support and positive feedback and regard. Thank you for listening. The last slide is the bibliography, and thank you so much.